The following program contains adult language and themes and is intended for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
In 1937, the Dominican Republic. The dictator at the time was Rafael Trujillo, known for his arbitrary cruelty, as well as some rather ordered cruelty. On this particular day in October, the general decides to execute 20,000 Haitian blacks who came across the border to work side by side with the Dominicans in the cane fields. And the only problem was he didn't know quite how to distinguish the Haitians on sight from the Dominicans. But the Haitians spoke a Spanish in which they did not roll their R's because of the Creole French. When they did speak Spanish, they could not trill that R. And so instead of saying something like Catarina, they would say Catalina. So the general decided to choose a word in Spanish that had an R in it, and to have the cane workers come up and, in this rather horrific shibboleth style of execution, have them pronounce this word. And those who said it correctly lived, and those who did not, in effect, had pronounced their own death sentence. This poem is in two parts, and each part has a title. Parsley, the cane fields. There is a parrot imitating spring in the palace, its feathers parsley green. Out of the swamp the cane appears to haunt us, and we cut it down. El General searches for a word. He is all the world there is. Like a parrot imitating spring, we lie down screaming as rain punches through, and we come up green. We cannot speak an R. Out of the swamp the cane appears, and then the mountain we call in whispers Catalina. The children gnaw their teeth to arrowheads. There is a parrot imitating spring. El General has found his word, perajil. Who says it lives. He laughs, teeth shining out of the swamp. The cane appears in our dreams, lashed by wind and streaming, and we lie down. For every drop of blood, there is a parrot imitating spring. Out of the swamp, the cane appears. The palace. The word the general's chosen is parsley. It is fall, when thoughts turn to love and death. The general thinks of his mother, how she died in the fall, and he planted her walking cane at the grave, and it flowered, each spring stolidly forming 4-star blossoms. The general pulls on his boots. He stomps to her room in the palace, the one without curtains, the one with a parrot in a brass ring. As he paces, he wonders, who can I kill today? And for a moment, the little knot of screams is still. The parrot, who has traveled all the way from Australia in an ivory cage, is coy as a widow, practicing spring. Ever since the morning his mother collapsed in the kitchen while baking skull-shaped candies for the Day of the Dead, the general has hated sweets. He orders pastries brought up for the bird. They arrive dusted with sugar on a bed of lace. The knot in his throat starts to twitch. He sees his boots the first day in battle, splashed with mud and urine as a soldier falls at his feet, amazed. How stupid he looked at the sound of artillery. I never thought it would sing, the soldier said, and died. Now the general sees the fields of sugar cane lashed by rain and streaming. He sees his mother's smile, the teeth gnawed to arrowheads. He hears the Haitians sing without R's as they swing the great machetes. Catalina, they sing, Catalina, mi madre, mi amor en muerte. God knows his mother was no stupid woman. She could roll an R like a queen. Even a parrot can roll an R. In the bare room, the bright feathers arch in a parody of greenery as the last pale crumbs disappear under the blackened tongue. Someone calls out his name in a voice so like his mother's, a startled tear splashes the tip of his right boot. My mother, my love in death. The general remembers the tiny green sprigs men of his village wore in their capes to honor the birth of a son. He will order many this time to be killed for a single beautiful word. Thank you. I'd like to read you a few poems from my latest book, Mother Love, that Quincy mentioned. This book is loosely based on the story of Demeter and Persephone. And I say loosely because the poems don't remain in the classical time or space, but move all through time and in all sorts of countries and all sorts of situations as it explores mother and daughter relationships. As you remember, the story of Persephone and Demeter is one of the few in the Greek pantheon of stories where a person, a goddess, actually defies the main god, Zeus, and gets away with it. In fact, I think it might be the only time, and it was a woman who did this. What she did was that when after her daughter was kidnapped, snatched underground by the god of the underground, Hades, she began to mourn, and because Demeter was the goddess of the earth, when she mourned, the earth began to die. And the other gods came and tried to convince her to, come back, go back to work. She simply went on strike until Zeus had to go to his brother, Hades, and said, maybe you better give the girl back. Only at that point did Demeter begin again to allow the earth to grow. I'll stop right there with the story and interject a little bit more later, but I'd like to begin with the very first poem in the book, which is one of the few stories, one of the few poems in the book, which is actually from the male's point of view. It's called Heroes. I always thought that most of our heroes are become heroes because they suddenly find themselves in a place, at the right time or the wrong time, depending on how you look at it. And they simply realize this is their moment. They just have to do it, be it good or bad. Heroes. A flower in a weedy field, make it a poppy. You pick it. Because it begins to wilt, you run to the nearest house to ask for a jar of water. The woman on the porch starts screaming. You've plucked the last poppy in her miserable garden, the one that gave her the strength every morning to rise. It's too late for apologies, though you go through the motions, offering trinkets and a juicy spot in the written history she wouldn't live to read anyway. So you strike her, she hits her head on a white boulder, and there's nothing to be done but break the stone into gravel to prop up the flower in the stolen jar you have to take along, because you're a fugitive now, and you can't leave clues. Already the story's starting to unravel, the villagers stirring as your heart pounds into your throat. Oh, why did you pick that idiot flower? Because it was the last one, and you knew it was going to die. Let me read you one from that splits the times between the classical myth and a more modern take on it. Persephone falling. You know, Persephone went out into the fields to pick flowers, an innocent activity, when she was kidnapped. Persephone falling. One narcissus among the ordinary, beautiful flowers, one unlike all the others. She stooped to pull harder, when, sprung out of the earth on his glittering, terrible carriage, he claimed his due. It is finished. No one heard her. No one. She had strayed from the herd. Remember, go straight to school. This is important. Stop fooling around. Don't answer to strangers. Stick with your playmates. Keep your eyes down. This is how easily the pit opens. This is how 1 foot sinks into the ground. A lot of these poems are sonnets. One should never say never, and I thought that I would never be writing a lot of sonnets, and as it turns out, they're mostly sonnets or variations on sonnets. Again, fairly loose sonnets. That same scene, but from Persephone's point of view, from the daughters. The narcissus flower. I remember my foot in its frivolous slipper, a frightened bird, not the earth unzipped, but the way I could see my own fingers and hear myself scream as the blossom incinerated. And though nothing could chasten the plunge, this man adamant as a knife easing into the humblest crevice, I found myself at the center of a calm so pure it was hate. The mystery is, you can eat fear before fear eats you. You can live beyond dying and become a queen whom nothing surprises. You might remember from the story that when Zeus talks to his brother Hades and says, you've got to give the girl back, right before Persephone goes back up above ground to join her mother again, she eats 6 pomegranate seeds. And because she had eaten something in hell, the rules were that she could not return above ground forever, but had to keep coming back to the underground 6 months out of the year, half of the year, which is why we have winter and fall when she returns to underground. But you know, the question I always wondered about was why, if she wanted to get back to her mother so badly, did she stop and eat those 6 pomegranate seeds? And my daughter is 13 now, and she's, you know, kind of ready to grow and go. And I realized one day, she came into my room, I was writing on these poems, and she knew I was working on them, and she had been studying the Greek myths in school, and she came to the room with a book opened up to the myth, and she goes, you've been writing about us, haven't you? Walked out again, that was all I could write that day, but I realized too that perhaps there was more than one side of this story, and that perhaps Persephone really wanted to get away from home as well. This poem is called Wiederkehr, which is a German word for the return, but it's also a word for something that returns again and again. Wiederkehr. Persephone is speaking. He only wanted me for happiness, to walk in air and not think so much, to watch the smile begun in his eyes end on the lips his eyes caressed. He merely hoped in darkness to smell rain, and though he saw how still I sat to hold the rain untouched inside me, he never asked if I would stay, which is why, when the choice appeared, I reached for it. This next poem is a group of sonnets, a sequence of sonnets. It's a departure from the myth. In this one, in fact, I have the mother coming to convince her daughter to return, and the underworld, or hell, is the city of Paris. That's not what I really think of Paris. I really love Paris, but I thought it was appropriate kind of hell for a mother, if she thought her daughter had disappeared into it, especially if the man in question was a mediocre artist. The Bistro Sticks. The mother is speaking. The Bistro Sticks. She was thinner, with a mannered gauntness as she paused just inside the double glass doors to survey the room, silvery cape billowing dramatically behind her. What's this, I thought, lifting a hand until she nodded and started across the parquet. That's when I saw she was dressed all in gray, from a kittenish cashmere skirt and cowl down to the graphite signature of her shoes. "Sorry I'm late," she panted, though she wasn't, sliding into the chair, her cape tossed off in a shudder of brushed steel. We kissed. Then I leaned back to peruse my blighted child, this wary, aristocratic mole. "How's business?" I asked, and hazarded a motherly smile to keep from crying out, "Are you content to conduct your life as a cliché and, what's worse, an anachronism, the brooding artist's demi-monde?" Near the Rue Princesse, they had opened a galerie cum souvenir shop, which featured fuzzy off-color Monets next to his acrylics, no doubt, plus bearded African drums and the occasional miniature gargoyle from Notre Dame the great artist had carved at breakfast with a pocket knife. "Tourists love us. The Parisians, of course," she blushed, "are amused, though not without a certain admiration." The Chateaubriand arrived on a bone-white plate, smug and absolute in its fragrant crust, a black plug steaming like the heart plucked from the chest of a worthy enemy. One touch with her fork sent pink juices streaming. Admiration for what? Wine, a bloody Pinot Noir, brought color to her cheeks. Why, the aplomb with which we've managed to support our art. Meaning he'd convinced her to pose nude for his appalling canvases, faintly futuristic landscapes strewn with car wrecks and bodies being chewed by rabid cocker spaniels. "I'd like to come by the studio," I ventured, "and see the new stuff." "Yes, if you wish." A delicate rebuff before the warning. He dresses all in black now. Me he drapes in blue and carmine, and even though I think it's kind of cute, in company I tend toward more muted shades. She paused and had the grace to drop her eyes. She did look ravishing, spookily insubstantial, a lipstick ghost on tissue, or as if one stood on a fifth-floor terrace peering through a fringe of rain at Paris's dreaming chimney pots, each sooty issue wobbling skyward in an ecstatic, oracular spiral. And he never thinks of food. I wish I didn't have to plead with him to eat. Fruit and cheese appeared, arrayed on leaf green dishes. I stuck with café crème. "This camembert so ripe," she joked. "It's practically grown hair, mucking a golden glob complete with parsley sprig onto a heel of bread." Nothing seemed to fill her up. She swallowed, sliced into a pear, speared each tear-shaped lavalier, and popped the dripping mess into her pretty mouth. Nowhere the bright tufted fields, weighted vines, and sun poured down out of the south. "But are you happy?" Fearing, I whispered it quickly. "What? You know, Mother," she bit into the starry rose of a fig, "one really ought to try the fruit here." I've lost her, I thought, and called for the bill. Thank you. Demeter waiting. "No, who can bear it? Only someone who hates herself, who believes to pull a hand back from a daughter's cheek is to put love into her pocket, like one of those ashen Christian philosophers or a war-bound soldier. She is gone again, and I will not bear it. I will drag my grief through a winter of my own making and refuse any meadow that recycles itself into hope. Shit on the cicadas, dry meteor flash, finicky butterflies. I will wail and thrash until the whole goddamn golden panorama freezes over. Then I will sit down and wait for her. Yes. That's a bad one. Another more contemporary one. Used. The conspiracy is to make us thin. Size 3s are all the rage, and skirts ballooning above twinkling knees are every man-child's pre-adolescent dream. Tabula rasa. No slates that clean. We've earned the navel's sunken grief when the last child emptied us of their brief interior light. Our muscles say we have been used. Have you ever tried silk sheets? I did, persuaded by postnatal dread and a Macy's clerk to bargain for more zip. We couldn't hang on, slipped to the floor, and by morning the quilts had slid off too. Enough of guilt. It's hard work staying cool. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to end with two poems that deal more directly with my daughter. She's made me promise not to ever read this as long as I'm within 50 miles of her. That was our agreement, and since I'm a little bit further, I live in Virginia, I can read this tonight. This poem was written about the time when she was at that age when children love to hear stories read over and over and over again, and you better not try to switch around the words. And the book in question is Maurice Sendak's Mickey in the Night Kitchen. After reading Mickey in the Night Kitchen for the third time before bed, and there's an epigraph, I'm in the milk and the milk's in me, I'm Mickey. My daughter spreads her legs to find her vagina. Hairless, this mistaken bit of nomenclature is what a stranger cannot touch without her yelling. She demands to see mine, and momentarily we're a lopsided star among the spilled toys, my prodigious scallops exposed to her neat cameo. And yet the same glazed tunnel, layered sequences. She is 3. That makes this innocent. We're pink, she shrieks and bounds off. Every month she wants to know where it hurts and what the wrinkled string means between my legs. This is good blood, I say, but that's wrong too. How to tell her that it's what makes us, black mother, cream child, that we're in the pink and the pink's in us. Thank you. Thank you. And I'd like to end with a very recent poem. Although the situation it described happened even before the last one. My daughter is 13 now, and this happened in the hospital where she was born. Sometimes it takes a long time to get a poem out. We had a midwife in the hospital who was a magnificent creature. She was very, very tall, over 6 feet, very dark, very long hair, and she seemed to know everything. If we had, Miles Davis on, she would know what, where it was, where this live performance had been taped. If it was Randy Newman, she knew the song. If it was Bach, she knew what cantata it was. And we wondered, though, what was she? Because we could not place her. And finally, after a couple of days, we placed her, and we took it as a good omen for our own little potpourri child. She was born in Phoenix, Arizona, hence the title, incarnation in Phoenix. Into this paradise of pain she strides on the slim tether of a nurse's bell, her charcoal limbs emerging from crisp whites, unlikely as an envelope issuing smoke. I've rung because my breasts have risen, artesian. I'm not ready for this motherhood stuff. Her name is Raven, and she swoops across the tiled wilderness, hair boiling thunder over the rampart of bobby pins spoking her immaculate cap. She dips once for the baby just waking, fists punching in for work right on schedule, bends again to investigate what should be natural, milk pouring into one tiny vociferous mouth. Ah, she whispers, ambrosia, shaming me instantly. But no nectar trickles forth, no manna descends from the vault of heaven to feed this pearly syllable, this package of leafy persuasion dropped on our doorstep and ripening before us, a miniature United Nations, just like me, Raven says, citing the name of her mother's village somewhere in Norway, her father a buffalo soldier. Now, of course, we can place her, an African Valkyrie, who takes my breast in her fists, grunting, "This hurts you more than it does me." Then my laugh squeezed to a whimper, and the milk running out. Thank you.